One more minute. Okay. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tojayamudirayet Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjanachalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaha Kada Mayam Dadati Supadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Saganadita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namaste Saptakanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Shubhanusute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Mukam Karoti Vachalam Bangam Langrete Girim Vikrapata Mahamam Deshri Zinataridam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Hari Bol Hare Krishna. So thank you all for gathering to hear the glorious Srimad Bhagavad, the most purifying all scriptures. That scripture which, as the Bhagavad itself describes, is what Krishna left behind on the planet as a representative of himself when the Lord himself disappeared from the planet. So the Srimad Bhagavad is not different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is like the sun. It is a transcendental sun shining in the age of Kali, dispelling, for those who take shelter of it, dispelling the dense ignorance of material nescience. So by the mercy of the Lord, we have completed our summary discussions on the first 4 cantos of the Srimad Bhagavad. And after a short break, we are resuming our discussions of the Bhagavad Puran. And today, by Krishna's blessings, we are getting the opportunity to resume the discussions and begin with the 5th canto, Srimad Bhagavad. There are a total of 12 cantos which span around 18,000 shlokas. So out of the 18, of course, not all of them are equal in length. Some cantos, especially the 3rd and the 4th cantos, are quite extensive as compared to some of the others. The second is also fairly extensive. The Canto is not that long. Doesn't also have that many chapters. I forgot the exact number of chapters. It's not very long as compared to the other cantos. So we'll be beginning the discussion of the fifth canto. In the fourth canto, the primary discussion was on the descendants of Maharaj Uttanapad. You remember, Swayambhuva Manu had a few sons. One of them was Maharaj Uttanapad. One of them was Maharaj Priyavrata, Priyavrata being the eldest. But Priyavrata did not take up the rule. If you remember, when we discussed the fourth canto, we had discussed how Uttanapad took over the rule of the universe. Priyavrata did not want to, and why he didn't want to, we will come to that discussion shortly. And then subsequent to this, the subsequent kings were Uttanapad's descendants, Dhruva, and so on and so forth. We discussed so many of those kings in the fourth canto, all the way coming down up to the Prachetas. If you remember, that was the concluding pastimes of the fourth canto. Does anybody remember who was the father of the Prachetas?
Prachina Bari.
Yeah, Prachina Parishat. Thank you. Good. So not everything is lost yet. King Prachina Parishat, who was very attached to fruitive material activities. And of course, he was also transformed eventually. His sons, who had heard the Rudra Gita and who eventually received the favor of Lord Hari, they also transcended material existence. So this whole descendants of King Uttanapad ruled over the universe for a significant period of time. And then eventually all these kings disappeared. At the end of the fourth canto, there is a brief mention by Shukadeva Goswami to King Parikshit Maharaj that after all this happened, King Priyavrata who had achieved very great spiritual advancement, in fact, who had become a self-realized devotee of the Lord, he took to household life. And then eventually after that, he again became detached from all material association and achieved perfection. So when Shukadeva Goswami heard this particular comment, he became extremely curious. Because he found it very odd that such a spiritually advanced, elevated person as Maharaj Priyavrata would become attracted to materialistic activities and enter Grihastha ashram and enjoy household life, become attached again to the world, apparently, and then eventually again become detached and achieve the supreme destination. It was very curious. Parikshit Maharaj asked this question to Shukadeva Goswami. He said that materialistic activities are the root cause of bondage, and especially those who Those who are advanced in spiritual understanding generally avoid getting into materialistic life, especially materialistic life of that of a king and governance and all these things, because that defeats the human purpose of life. The goal of human life is to exclusively engage in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But a typical household life in the material world is usually such a dangerous situation that it makes one forget the real goal of life and makes one lost in the aham and mama, I, me, and mine. And that is why saintly people generally avoid such an entanglement. So why is it that Priyavrata Maharaj, who was initially avoiding, suddenly went into this kind of life? Devotees are usually fully liberated souls. So how did a great soul like Maharaj Priyavrata become again absorbed in family affairs? He had received instructions from Narada Muni. He was perfectly situated in knowledge. He was absorbed in devotional service to the Lord. What happened? Those who are actively experiencing transcendental pleasure in the shade of the feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such elevated great souls, they experience such transcendental pleasure in serving the Lord, in taking shelter of His lotus feet, that taste is so much higher than any kind of a material indulgence. It is not possible for them to become attracted to material life. How can the consciousness be attracted again to a materialistic family life? Oh, Shukdev Goswami, this is a big doubt for me. And if he again got attached to materialistic association, like wife, children, home, how did he again achieve? You said at the end he again achieved perfection of Krishna consciousness. What is this? It's all very confusing. So because Parikshit Maharaj was listening so attentively, he caught this particular point. He really wanted to understand. Because when we hear a very great devotee of the Lord going from a position of apparently from a position of higher renunciation to a position of lower renunciation, it can be bewildering. Because usually those who are fully attached to the Lord's lotus feet, they do not go down in the renunciation. This kind of going down in renunciation usually happens because of offenses to the lotus feet of either the Lord or his pure devotees. Whenever one becomes offensive, then it is possible that one's devotional service, even though it is not totally lost, may get temporarily covered over. Bhakti is never lost. Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, Nehabhikramanashosti pratyavayo na vidyate salpamas apapiyasya dharmasya tarayate mahato bhaya. It's never lost. So bhakti cannot be destroyed, but bhakti can become covered over if one is offensive, and when it becomes covered over, one can become temporarily illusioned or distracted and come to a lower platform. Of course, eventually the Lord delivers such a distracted devotee and again reestablishes himself, and the devotee is never totally forgetful of the Lord. But for some time he may become apparently distracted. Those kind of things happen. But what was actually Priyavrata Maharaj's situation? This is what he was hinting, even though he did not particularly talk about offenses. But Prabhupada mentions this, that this is Usually, Prabhupada comments that when this happens, this either happens because of offenses, like what we just discussed, or it may happen because sometimes for very special reasons, the Lord himself or his pure devotees themselves may want that particular devotee to do like that. This is quite interesting and quite extraordinary. So we will be discussing this whole pastime in great detail today. It's a very sweet, very instructive pastime of Priyavrata Maharaj with very interesting insights into spiritual protocols. So Shukdev Goswami begins to respond to Maharaj Parikshit. Says, yes, Parikshit Maharaj, what you said is correct. Those who are actually truly very advanced, for them, they have such great taste in Hari Kirtan. They are tasting the nectarian honey of the Lord's lotus feet. But yes, it is possible sometimes, and Prabhupada explains these two reasons that we just discussed, that sometimes their progress may be checked temporarily by some impediment. But still, one should never be critical of such great personalities. One should be very careful. One should not become critical of these personalities because they are still considered very exalted. And Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita also. Apiches duracharo bhajate mam ananya bhak sadhur eva samantavyo samyak vyavasito hi saha. That even if a devotee sometimes by the force of the powerful influence of the material energy may deviate from his ideal behavior as a pure soul, even then, because he is continuing to worship me with firm faith, he should still be considered a sadhu, and very soon he will overcome all his apparent shortcomings and be re-established in a spotless position. Shipram bhavati dharmatma shashvat shantim nigacchati partha pratajanihi name bhakta pranasya. Very soon he'll be re-established. So yes, sometimes because of certain extraordinary situations, it may happen that a devotee may apparently seem to come. And we see this not only amongst very great devotees, but sometimes those who have been, even amongst the sadhakas, those who have been practicing spiritual life for many years, somehow, because of their conditionings or offenses, may temporarily become distracted. But those who are sufficiently advanced, even though they may undergo this kind of a temporary phase, they never really give up the lotus feet of the Lord. They still somehow or the other continue the process of devotional service, and ultimately they come out of this. So Shukdev Goswami narrates the pastime of what actually happened with Priyavrata Maharaj. So now I'm going to tell you the story. I'm not going to go necessarily verse by verse, but I'm going to summarize what happened with Priyavrata Maharaj. So the story is very interesting. So like what I mentioned, Priyavrata Maharaj, his spiritual master was Narad Muni. Narad Muni is the guru of so many great souls. The Prachitas, Prahlad, Dhruva, Prachina Barhi, so many. Vyasadev himself. So Narad Muni personally instructed Priyavrata Maharaj in the goal of life. And Priyavrata Maharaj fully accepted these transcendental instructions of Narad Muni. And by hearing these instructions with faith, by that strong sadhu sangha, Priyavrata Maharaj was very firmly determined about the futility of material existence and that the only goal of life is to take complete shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engage 100% in the devotional service of the Supreme. So even though Priyavrata Maharaj was the eldest son of Swayambhu Manu, kind of retired to the forest. He was never married. So he kind of retired to the forest. So he was leading some kind of a renounced life. Not that he had taken sannyas. He was like a brahmachari, but for all practical purposes renounced. And he let Uttanapa take over the rule, and he went into the forest, and he was residing into the forest. He did not want his consciousness to be diverted with anything else. See, those who are very clear in their spiritual vision, very convinced about the principles of spiritual life with realization, who have a transcendental taste, they just see the futility of material existence so clearly that sometimes some of them may just feel, oh, this whole thing is so futile, I don't want to go in that direction at all. And across the Bhagavatam, so many personalities we have seen who have displayed this kind of a character. Shukdev Goswami himself is the topmost example. First of all, he refused to come out of the womb of his mother for 16 years. And after he came out, he just walked away into the forest. The four Kumaras also did something like that in a very novel way. They kept their own body always to be of a 5-year-old boy. So no need for any discussion of marriage. I'll always remain 5-year-old. Neither will we be attracted, because when the body goes into a particular kind of age, then because of the bodily development also certain desires get triggered. Let us just be 5-year-old boys, very innocent. So these kind of materialistic desires of attraction to the opposite sex never arise in this body. So Priyavrata Maharaj was, even though he knew that it was his duty to rule, saw that Uttanapad is there. If Uttanapad is there, why do I have to do it? Everything was settled, and Uttanapad Maharaj took over the rule. So everything seemed to be kind of settled. But after, like what we just discussed, Uttanapad and his descendants had completed the rule, and suddenly the time came after the Prachitas that Swayambhu Manu found that there is no suitable person to take over the kingdom now. And this is a very dangerous situation, not having a qualified king. Because for the universal affairs to be carried out nicely, it's very important that a powerful, competent, dharmic leader be at the helm. Very important. A strong Kshatriya king who is guided by Brahmanas is very important for peace, prosperity, and spiritual development of the entire kingdom. So Priyavrata, knowing that Priyavrata Maharaj had untimely retired, untimely because he did not go through his entire, many of the others became kings, they got married, they had children, and after that, they did their duty and then retired. Priyavrata said bye-bye very early in his age. So Swayambhu Manu was thinking, who else is there? They're looking around, nobody. Oh yes, Priyavrata is the one who can become the next king. So Priyavrata had already given up everything and gone to the forest. And Swayambhu Manu identified, yes. But Swayambhu Manu decided that I have to now go, and I have the difficult task of convincing Priyavrata Maharaj to become the king. Because he knew that Priyavrata was truly a very, very advanced soul. And Priyavrata would be regularly associating with his spiritual master, Narad Muni. So Swayambhu Manu decided that I want to go and talk to Priyavrata and convince him. But he was thinking this is going to be very challenging. He's his father. So in one way, the father can instruct the son, but he said, this is a little different situation. So I need some backup. So instead of going alone, he approached Narad Muni also. Narad Muni, you are the guru of my son, Priyavrata. And this is the situation. So you please accompany me. I'm going to tell him this. If you are there and I am there, then we both can convince him together. Narad said, okay, I can come. Whatever you want to speak, you speak, but I can accompany you if that is the service that you want. So they came. Priyavrata was so honored. Spiritual master, his father, received them and worshipped them very nice. And actually, both of them are Mahajanas, both Narad Muni and Swayambhuva Manu. Can you imagine? This is such a unusual, odd, rare situation where two Mahabhagavats, two Mahajan Mahabhagavats are coming to this young, unmarried, young prince who is renounced and doesn't want to do anything to do with this world. Tell him, Baba, please, you need you to take care of the kingdom. You give up all this and get married and become a king. Generally, people will be very happy. They say, oh, very good. You see, actually, I want to be renounced. What to do? Krishna's will. Guru instructed me to get married. We always like to glorify our shortcomings by putting Guru's name, Krishna's name, devotees' names. But actually, it's all Krishna's will. Priyavrata Maharaj wasn't a person like that. He was so advanced in his consciousness, he was not at all interested. And even though he was very respectful in dealing with them, he wasn't particularly convinced by the instructions of Swayambhu Manu and Narad Muni. Of course, even though Narad Muni was there, Narad Muni never is particularly fond of anybody entering Grihastha ashram. So he was there. He wasn't, it looks like he wasn't particularly actively trying to convince Priyavrata, but he was tagging along Swayambhuva Manu to give him moral support. So Priyavrata Maharaj knew that the order of the father cannot be rejected. And in this case, the father is not an ordinary father. He is Swayambhuva Manu. So he was trying to resist that proposal. He's saying, why are you putting me into such a dangerous situation? Don't you know you are all so advanced souls? You know how dangerous material existence is. And you are asking me to go back and take care of a kingdom, rule the kingdom, accept such responsibility. I will become distracted and diverted from my devotional service if I get engaged in all this. Maya is so powerful. Maya is so powerful. It is very, very difficult to be actively engaged in material affairs and not be affected. I think I'll be distracted. Maybe I may fall down. So he was not saying no, but he was giving all these, and these are, it is good reasoning. Because the force of Maya is indeed very, very powerful. Even great souls, if they are not very, very, very careful, very active engagement in the affairs of the world, can actually drag down one's consciousness and sometimes bewilder one's intelligence. That's why great souls always understanding the immense power of the Lord's Maya energy, always praying to the Lord, oh Lord, let me never forget you, let me never forget you, please protect me, even though they are very advanced. Srila Prabhupada himself, he was going to the Western world. He was very intensely praying to Lord Krishna that I am going into the capital of the kingdom of Maya. Please protect me so that my consciousness will not get distracted. So devotees are always very humble. They understand the power of Maya. They don't take an attitude of, oh, I am pure devotee, I am great. Who's this Maya? I will kick her in her face. Daivi hi esha gunamayi mama maya duratyaya mama evaye prapadyante maya metam. This divine energy of mind, composed of the three modes of material nature, is very difficult to overcome. Krishna, if he is saying is very difficult to overcome, who are we to say, oh, I will easily overcome it? Those who are fully taking shelter of me alone, they can overcome. And always to be fixed in that consciousness of taking full shelter of Krishna while being engaged in all kinds of activities is not so easy. Theoretically sounds nice, but it's not so easy. And that's why even great souls, when they are faced with such kind of active engagement, are a bit reluctant. So in that sense, Priyavrata Maharaj was rightfully reluctant. So when this was happening, Swayambhuva Manu realized, I need further support. Me and his father and his guru is not adequate to convince him. So Swayambhuva Manu decided to take the help of his father, who is the grandfather of Priyavrata, who is Lord Brahma. So as this was happening, Lord Brahma also understanding the seriousness of the situation. And what was the seriousness of the situation? That a proper qualified ruler was needed for the universe. And that nobody other than Priyavrata Maharaj was duly qualified to take on that position. Because this was not a small kingdom. It was not just taking care of a small kingdom. This was practically the kingdom of the universe. So it couldn't just be a Tom, Dick and Harry. It had to be a very, very qualified person. So Lord Brahma himself descended. Can you imagine that place? Priyavrata is doing austerities, and here comes Swayambhuva Manu, here comes Narad Muni, and then Lord Brahma seated on his swan carrier, he appears there. So as Lord Brahma also joins the negotiation that is going on, this negotiation conversation. It wasn't technically a negotiation, but he was just trying to convey his apprehension. So when Brahma is the firstborn living entity in the universe, and he comes, all sages, the residents of Siddhalok, Gandharvalok, Sadhyalok, Charanalok, sages, devatas, they all assembled within the sky to greet and receive Lord Brahma and worship him. So suddenly in the sky, this is the place where Narad Muni and Swayambhu Manu were talking to Parikshit Maharaj. Suddenly Brahmaji appeared, just like a full moon, surrounded by all these sages and devatas, which looked like beautiful twinkling stars in the sky. This was in the area which is known as the Gandhamadana hill. It was on the border of the Gandhamadal hill. So Narad Muni also, when he saw the swan, for Narad Muni also he is the father. So Swambhu Manu also, Lord Brahma is the father. So Narad Muni came forward and they offered, Swambhu Manu, Narad Muni, they all offered objects of worship to Lord Brahma and offered beautiful poetry glorifying him in perfect Sanskrit language according to the proper etiquette. So they received him properly. Of course, Priyavrata was also extremely respectful and received him very nice. So when Lord Brahma appeared there, looked at Priyavrata Maharaj, and he looked at Priyavrata Maharaj not with some anger. Why you are not listening to your father and your teacher? I have come to chastise you. Not like that. The dealings of these great souls is at a different level. They are not like some temple authority chastising. You must do this, I am telling you to do. If you don't listen to me, you are doing aparad. You are not chastising that. Because even Swayambhuva Manu, if he wanted, he could have forced Priyavrata. Be quiet, I am telling you, do it. He didn't do that. Narad Muni could have done that, they didn't do that. So Lord Brahma also, when he appeared there, he looked at Priyavrata with such compassion. He was smiling and looking at Priyavrata with great compassion. He was looking at him. And he spoke to him. He said, "Oh, my dear Priyavrata." Actually, Priyavrata is his grandson. So the grandfather speaking to a grandchild. Please hear attentively whatever I have to tell you. All of us are servants of the Supreme Lord, whether it is me, your father, Narad Muni, even Lord Shiva. Actually, Lord Shiva had also appeared there amongst the various great personalities. We all are servants of the Supreme Lord, and all of us carry out the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead without fail. We cannot deviate from his order. In fact, nobody can deviate from his order. Based on his order, the sun rises, sun sets. Everything is going on by the. Nobody can overrule his desire. Neither by severe austerities, nor by Vedic study, nor by mystic yoga, or by any physical or intellectual process, nor through any opulence or powers of one's own religion, or by one's own achievement, or by help from others. Nobody can defy the Lord. The Lord's instructions and the Lord's desire is irrefutable. It is unstoppable. That is why the Bhagavatam refers to the Lord as Swarat, simply independent. It's also said, Parasya Shaktir Vivadeva Shruyate Swabhaviki Jnana Balakriyasha. Lord desires something, his will gets executed by his energies. Nobody can come in the way and stop or put a check to the Lord's desires. So we are all servants, no matter how great we are. Why is he telling all this? Because he's trying to tell Priyavrata that actually that you should become the king is the desire of the Lord. So don't try to resist it. So he's not trying to say this is my order, this is your father's order, this is his order. We are all servants of the Supreme Lord. Nobody can check his order. So indirectly he's telling, please don't try to check and resist the order of this. From Brahma to ant, nobody can stop. And all of us, O Priyavrata, we have been given a particular kind of body according to our karma. And especially in this human form of life, those who have taken the human form of life, we are expected based on our birth, which is, the the varna that we have taken birth according to our qualities and activities. We must follow the varnashram system according to that. There is a particular quota of happiness and distress that is allocated to the body based on our past karma. So all of us have to go through it. This whole varnashram system is so scientifically organized by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the Lord must be worshipped by people in general, including you, by following that varnashram system. You are born as a Kshatriya. You are born to be a king. Why are you hesitating to perform your duty? Because the way to please the Supreme Lord is to perform your duties perfectly. There are verses in the scriptures which say that the Supreme Lord is worshipped by performing one's varnashram duties in a detached way for his pleasure. Just like bulls are obliged to move in a particular direction according to the direction of the driver who's pulling on the ropes of the bull, the bullock cart rider who's pulling on the bulls with his rope, he's controlling where the bulls will go. Similarly, all our lives are guided by the instructions of the Supreme Lord in the form of varnashram duties. Therefore, one must remain situated based on one's situation, based on karma, the kind of body and situation one has acquired, and performs one's duties. Just like a blind man is led by a person who has eyes, we must lead our lives according to the instructions of the Lord as they have come in the form of the varnashram system. And even for those who are actually liberated souls, still they have actually come in a particular body. And it is better to execute the duty according to the body. Because even if one may be very advanced in spiritual consciousness, based on one's remaining karma, one has to enjoy the results of the good and bad activities of the past, the happiness and the distress. Even great souls go through life. Even though they are not interested in enjoying matter, they go through to exhaust the leftover results of good and bad of their previous lives. Materialistic persons get engrossed in the happiness and suffering, but liberated souls, they just go through it. Just like a person who is awakened from his sleep, he remembers his dream. Like that, liberated souls look at their happiness and distress. What does that mean? When a person wakes up from a dream, even if it's a bad dream or a good dream, they actually can clearly disassociate themselves from the dream, that, oh, this doesn't affect me directly. The tiger who tried to eat me in the dream has not actually eaten me. It actually cannot affect me. Nor did my becoming a king in the dream actually affect me in any way. Similarly, liberated persons see like this. So, you should emulate that. Why do you need to physically renounce? Try to emulate that kind of behavior. And such liberated souls, they remain steadfast in this kind of a detached consciousness and continue to perform their duties. And that's why they are never affected by the three modes of material nature. Please understand, if one is not actually perfectly situated in that consciousness and artificially tries to renounce the world, just by going from forest to forest, one cannot be free from materialistic life. Because renunciation is not just about not getting married. Every living entity has 6 wives beyond the married wife. Who are the 6 wives? The mind and the 5 senses. 6 wives. And wherever he goes, whichever forest he goes, these 6 wives will go with him and they will ask for enjoyment. So if these mind and senses is not controlled, running from forest to forest, what good is it going to do? So the real person, he who has controlled these six. And for one who has actually controlled the mind and the five senses, control these six, for him, even if he is married, what is the harm? Because he will never endeavor for sense enjoyment and never get entangled if he has controlled his mind and senses. That is why, Priyavrata, what is important is to control one's mind and senses, and then one can enter Grihastha ashram. So actually, Lord Brahma is reasoning to Priyavrata because he knows what is his objection. He's explaining to him how he should not be so fearful. Essentially, Lord Brahma is trying to tell him, don't be so fearful. You are already detached. You have already controlled the senses. So for you, it is not going to be such a dangerous thing and you will not be distracted. And he explains that a Grihastha ashram who properly, a person who enters Grihastha ashram with this proper consciousness and controls his mind and senses. So when one is trained in the Grihastha ashram like this, eventually when one's lusty desires have decreased, later on he can very easily take Vanaprastha and Sannyas. He will not be distracted and enamored by material nature. So this is a safer path, Priyavrata. Why don't you adopt this path instead? This path is approved by the Vedas. This path is rather recommended by the Vedas. And right now we think that this is the best path for you. So Priyavrata, my advice to you is take shelter inside your heart of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in that way you conquer these six sense organs, the mind and the five knowledge acquiring senses. Externally, you can accept material enjoyment because of the extraordinary circumstances under which the Lord himself wants you to do this. So why are you worried? Don't you think the Lord will protect you from all danger? It is the Lord's direct desire. We are conveying this to you. So do not worry. While in general it is true, in your case you have the Lord's special extraordinary protection. So being instructed like this, Priyavrata realized that, I am now checkmate. Now further resistance. So my main concern was that I may fall down, but Brahmaji has assured me that I'll be protected, that I'll not fall down. So my father, my grandfather, my spiritual master, all are saying that this is my duty. So Priyavrata, keeping on his head the instructions of all these gurus, and ultimately the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he accepted Swayambhu Manu's desire. And he agreed to become king. Of course, Lord Brahma blessed him. Then Lord Brahma went back to Satyaloka, his abode. So Swayambhu Manu was also very happy. Narad Muni was not resentful, nor was Priyavrata. Of course, Narad Muni is always happy if somebody becomes a brahmachari or a sannyasi. He's not particularly fond of rasa. But in this case, he knew that ultimately what is this about? This is not about brahmachari or sannyas or vanpati. Ultimately, what is it that a devotee wants to do? The ultimate question that the devotee has to ask is, what is it that will please the Supreme Personality of Godhead the most? So if all the authorities are saying that this is the path which will please the authorities the most, then that is the path of auspiciousness. So Narad was not resentful. So Priyavrata accepted all the governmental duties for maintaining and protecting all the planets of the universe. And of course, he was fully protected in his consciousness by the Supreme Personality of God. Very, very extraordinary episode. So now when Priyavrata Maharaj decided this and he accepted the position of the king, now you cannot just become a king. You have to become a king, then you have to have a queen. So he decided to get married because you have to become grahastha. You cannot accept half of the ashram and give up the other half. So you need a sahadharmacharini, you need a wife to assist you. So he got married to a very chaste and divine lady by the name of Barhishmati. So this Barhishmati is the daughter of the great Vishwakarma, the Prajapati. And in due course, Barhishmati gave birth to 10 sons of Priyavrata, who are all extraordinary. It is said they are all equal in character to Priyavrata Maharaj, in beauty, in character, in magnanimity, and other qualities. And also she had one daughter, Urjaswati. So 10 sons and one daughter. The name of these 10 sons are similar to the 10 names of Agni. And the names are Agnidra, Idmajivva, Yajnabahu, Mahavira, Hiranyareta, Ghृतप्रस्थ, Savana, Medatithi, Vitihotra, and Kavi. Out of these 10 souls, all of them were very qualified, but especially 3, Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, it is said they were like Priyavrata also, in the sense that they were thoroughly detached from any materialistic life. They lived a life of complete celibacy. They were trained perfectly in brahmachari life from their childhood, and they gradually progressed all the way into sannyas ashram and became Paramhamsas. They never entered Grihastha ashram. So see, such a powerful father can produce such powerful children. So they were always focused on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They were always absorbed. They were also never distracted. And they were also in one sense fortunate. They were never needed to be instructed to become kings. They could continue with their sannyas and remained in a parivrajak paramhamsa stage of life. There was one more wife which Maharaj Priyavrata had. And in that wife, there were 3 sons through that wife. And the names of those 3 sons were Uttama, Tamasa, and Raivata. Now, these 3 were also very extraordinary personalities, and in subsequent ages, they all became Manvantara heads. Means they themselves become Manu. So there are certain Manvantaras which are known as the Raivata Manvantara, Tamasa Manvantara, Uttama Manvantara, in which these 3 sons respectively ruled. So after Kavi, Mahavira, and Savana, the 3 sons from the first wife, Urjaswati, after they achieved the Paramhamsa stage of life, the Bhagavatam says Maharaj Priyavrata continued to rule the universe for 11 Arbuda years. Prabhupada explains the purport. What is Arbuda? 100 million years. 1 Arbuda. And he was ruling for 11 Arbuda years. And he performed his duties very, very meticulously. Perfectly making sure that dharma is followed everywhere. He would do his duties very diligently, not lazily. Oh, I didn't want to do. I've been forced to do. I'm just going to sit on the throne, do nothing. Right? Sometimes when we are forced to do a service we don't want to do, we'll do it in such a lousy manner that our authority will finally tell, okay, Baba Prabhuji, you go. I'll give this service to somebody else. So he was not doing like that. He was doing it very diligently. At an external level, he seemed to be so engrossed in the affairs of the universe. In fact, he had such an affectionate, romantic, beautiful relationship with his wife, Queen Barhishmati. At an external level, it seemed as if he is like an ordinary man who is enamored by his wife and has a very affectionate relationship with his husband. Actually, he was a great soul. He was not never overcome with illusion. That is why we should not be quick to judge. Sometimes a great soul may appear attached. He may not actually be attached. So one episode is mentioned. We'll complete the chapter in 2 minutes. One episode is mentioned. It is said while ruling the universe, at one time, Maharaj Priyavrata was dissatisfied with the way Surya Dev made his orbit, which encircled the Sumeru hill. So Surya has an orbit around Sumeru hill and he goes about in a particular way. So it is said when the sun is on the northern side of the hill, the southern side receives less light. So there's this Uttara and Dakshinan phenomenon because of the way the sun moves. So somehow Maharaj Priyavrata didn't particularly like the way this whole thing is set up. So it is said he followed the sun god on a brilliant chariot and he ensured that whichever part of the earth was night, that part of the earth was also illumined. So these kind of extraordinary things Maharaj Priyavrata performed, which means where there was night also it was day. Now how exactly he did through geometry, we don't want to go into that right now. Perhaps when we come towards the end of the 5th canto, when we discuss the universal structure, we can discuss that, how he managed that. But something interesting is mentioned that when Maharaj Priyavrata was on a chariot and he was chasing the sun, it is said he was going around the Bhumandal, chasing the sun. It is said he divided the Bhumandala into 7 islands and 7 oceans. The name of these 7 islands of the Bhumandal is the Jambu, Plaksha, Shalmali, Kusha, Karauncha, Shaka and Pushkar. Each of the subsequent island is twice the size of the previous. And there is a liquid ocean separating each of the 2 land masses. So all this will be discussed in great detail in the 5th canto later. There is the ocean of the salt water, sugarcane juice, liquor, ghee, milk, yogurt, and sweet drinking water. So all this geography is the geography of the Bhumandal will be discussed. And the Bhumandal got divided in this way into 7 islands. And the 7 sons of Maharaj Priyavrata from his first wife, Urjaswati, 3 of them became Paramahamsas, the other 7 were given in charge of these 7 islands. You become the king of these 7 islands and you rule over. So he distributed the administrative responsibilities to these 7. Who are the 7? Agnidra, Idmajivva, Yajnabahu, Hiranyareta, Ghataprastha, Medatithi, and Vidhihotra. They all became king by the order of his father. The daughter Urjaswati was given in marriage to the great sage Shukracharya, who became the spiritual master of the Asuras. And later on, Shukracharya had a daughter by the name of Devayani. That's another interesting, beautiful story. We'll not go into that today. It's not just mentioned here, Devayani's name. So like this, very wonderfully and in very extraordinary way, Maharaj Priyavrata ruled the earth and he was never affected by the 6 material waves because he had taken the full shelter of the Lord. What are the 6 material waves? Hunger, thirst, lamentation, illusion, old age, and death. And he always conquered the mind and the 5 senses, the way Brahma had mentioned. So actually, he was always transcendental. So as all this was happening, somehow, being very humble, Priyavrata Maharaj was thinking to himself, and he was thinking about his Guru Narad Muni, and he was thinking, I've been doing this for 11 Arbuda years. that although I surrendered to my spiritual master Narada long back, see, I'm still actually somehow or the other entangled in material activities. So somehow by the inspiration of the Lord, again his desire for renunciation again aroused very strongly. And he began to criticize himself. Oh, I have fallen down into materialistic sense enjoyment. What is this? I've had enough. I'm so condemned. So in that way, when the right time came by the desire of the Lord, again that sense of renunciation appeared back in the nature of Priyavrata. He had already divided the kingdom across his 7 sons. He distributed all his possessions. Then ultimately he again, as was predicted and mentioned in the beginning of his chapter, he again gave up everything, including his wife. It seemed he was so much attached to it. Gave up his kingdom and he completely renounced all material attachment. Again, apparently again. And again became fully absorbed in the name, form, qualities, and pastimes of the Supreme Lord exclusively. And by the grace of his spiritual master Narad Muni and the great souls like Swayambhu, Manu, and Brahma, who gave their full blessings because he followed their instructions so diligently for all this while, was able to transcend material existence and return to the transcendental world. So that is why, because of this kind of extraordinary life, Priyavrata Maharaj, his life, his character, his activities are glorified in the scriptures. So he's a very, very great personality, worthy of our respect, our meditation, our contemplation, and discussion of his glories. So that brings us to the end of this chapter. Thank you very much. Shri Priyavrata Maharaj ki. So any questions, any comments?
Hare Krishna.
Yes, Suraj.
I always have one curious question.
Yes.
When it comes to Ajamil's story, right? Ajamil was taken by Vishnu Dutta. So let me take my case. Since I am not a complete devotee, right? And I am in between devotee, right? So what will be case with in such situation, my case? Because what it says is whoever has Tilak and Kantimala, that jurisdiction is for God, right? Others, what will be case with us?
Hopefully all of us will not see Yamaraj.
Yeah.
So don't worry. Ajamil's case is very different. So when we discuss Ajamil's case, we will discuss and analyze in great detail. I'll not go into that now. What exactly will happen to us at the end of our life depends both on how much we have put an effort, purify ourselves, how sincere, serious, selfless we are in our life in dedicating ourselves to Guru, Krishna, and the Vaishnavas, and above everything else, to the grace that will come from Guru and Krishna at the time of our death. So none of us can predict that. But our hope is based on the instructions of Prabhupada and the promise of Prabhupada and others, that if we are sincerely practicing Krishna consciousness, we can be very hopeful based on the mercy of Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada, that we have a very good chance to go back home, back to Godhead within one lifetime itself. Of course, this is grace, this is Kripa. We cannot assume or claim that it is my right. If we have that attitude, it will not happen. We must always feel ourselves utterly dependent. So we have to try our best and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then we will invoke the mercy But maybe for some of us, even though the Lord may want to take, for some of us, the Lord may say, no, I want you to stay back a little bit more. Just like Priyavrata Maharaj wanted to not go back, so to say, this is not get involved. But the Lord and the pure devotee said, no, you do some seva, I want you to do some seva, then you can renounce again. So it does happen that many devotees, the Lord may ask them to continue for another life or a few lifetimes within this world to assist him in his mission. So if that is the Lord's desire, then as the Lord's servants, we should be willing to, because our job is, our purpose is to please the Lord. Our purpose is not to go back to the spiritual world. If it pleases the Lord by continuing to serve here, then that is perfect. Of course, we don't think ourselves so qualified that the Lord will. But the point is that we should be willing, whatever will please the Lord. So at a personal level, I don't think I am, or I don't think I will be qualified to go back home, back to Godhead at the end of this life. I personally am very clear about that. I don't even have one iota of doubt. About what? Not that I will go, that I will not go. But I'm not dejected because of that. Why I'm not dejected? Because anyway, based on my effort, it was never going to be possible anyways. So we are not here to achieve and become qualified and throw the entry ticket on the Lord's face and say, here I come, open the door. No, it's not like that. Nobody goes into the spiritual world like that. We are all beggars. And we have to remain beggars. So there is a lot of hope because of the extraordinary mercy. And those who want that extraordinary mercy of the Lord, especially of Mahaprabhu, Prabhupada and our Acharyas, if we make a lifetime of sincere effort and we make a special effort to serve our spiritual masters and Lord Chaitanya by assisting in the mission of Lord Chaitanya to share Krishna consciousness with others, then our chances of receiving that mercy greatly increase. So in that spirit, we should continue and do our best, and whatever the Lord decides is okay.
Yeah.
Right? I do not have the face to even ask the Lord to take me back to God. Because I know I'm so thoroughly unqualified. I cannot, if the Lord asks me to ask also, I will feel too shy to ask. Because I know I'm just so thoroughly unqualified. So the best thing is for devotees, we leave it to the Lord. When it pleases the Lord, accept us and bring us. Until that time, that's why you see throughout the Bhagavatam, devotees are not praying. Who has prayed, Krishna, take me into the spiritual world? Nobody has prayed like this. What the devotees have prayed? Let me never forget you. Let me always remain in the association of your devotees. Let me always be engaged in your devotional service for as long as it takes. Of course, this is not an easy consciousness, but when one becomes a little bit more mature in devotional service, one realizes that this is the most beautiful consciousness to maintain and always remain dependent on the Lord, both materially and spiritually. So devotee is not pressured, we are not pressured. I have to go back, Will I go back? Oh, will I have? No. Mukti, bhukti, siddhi, kami, sakale, ashanta. Those who are desiring even mukti, this is a mukti, I must go. Bhukti, material desire, or siddhi. Those who have these kind of desires, they are always ashanta, never peaceful. Because then, will I get? Will I not get? Will I get? Will I not get? Oh, I thought I was going to get, but now I think I may not get. No, devotee is not so bewildered by all this. He knows he has the best protector and the best boss. Just like a small child is holding the hand of his parents. Have you seen a very small child when he's crossing the street? Is he bothered about where the cars are coming from? What? He knows my parents are holding my hand and I'm perfectly safe. I just have to walk with them. I just have to not leave their hand. And I'll be taken across the road. They're not bothered at all. So we have the perfect master. The challenge is to keep holding the hand in all situations, even when it seems that a car is going to come and knock us off. That is the difficult part. Remain always faithful. So my request is, yes, we have a lot of hope, but let us not be too concerned or too worried about that. You understand what I'm saying? We must make all efforts to go, but at the same time, we are detached. Because that consciousness is actually most pleasing. Because if our goal is just to go somewhere, then our desire is not to please the Supreme Personality of God. Correct? Yeah. I'm not saying you are having, I'm just giving a broader context of. So whatever you are thinking is wonderful. We are all very unqualified. And no matter how qualified we become, we will remain very unqualified. From the perspective of the platform of pure devotion that is needed to enter the spiritual. And that's okay. We'll remain humble like that.
Yeah. Thank you, Ravi. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Anything else?
Prabhuji, can I ask something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Difference between sin and offenses. You once said that sin doesn't destroy devotion, but offenses can destroy, right? So
yes.
What is the difference? I mean,
sin is when we violate one of the injunctions of scripture, one of the dharmic principles. It is known as sin. Not perform one's duty is sin. For example, if a living entity is drinking liquor, it is sin. If he is eating meat, it is a sin. If he is killing somebody, it is a sin. Is lying, it is a sin. A sin produces a corresponding equivalent material reaction in the form of some pain. Correct? Yeah. So you perform sin. The sin will produce a karmic reaction. It may come immediately, it may come after some time, it may come in this life, next life, after 100 lives. Whenever it comes, it will come. Equal and opposite, it will settle itself, account settle. That's how a sin works. I'm giving a simplified explanation. There are all other smaller dimensions to it. But broadly, this is how sin works. So sin doesn't have a permanent impact. It has a temporary material impact. Sin never touches the soul directly. Never impacts the soul. It can, to some extent, agitate and distract the person from a dharmic life, but it doesn't truly touch the soul because it is at a very material level. What is an aparad? When a particular living entity, a devotee or not a devotee, offends a devotee of the Lord or offends the Lord, then that is called as aparadha. What does aparadha mean? Aparadha means that which is opposed to aradhana. Radha. Radha means Radha. Who's Radha? Radha is the perfect person who does the perfect aradhana of Hari. So that which is opposed, apa, Radha, that one which is opposed to proper to the cultivation of devotion to the Lord. So an aparad is something like a spiritual sin. To just explain to you in a very simple word, spiritual sin. Material sin only affects the subtle body. It never affects the soul. But a spiritual sin goes beyond. Of course, it may produce a reaction to the gross and subtle body, but it goes beyond that. But because it is aparad, can actually put a very serious impact to one's devotional progress. Aparad has the potency to stop or check one's spiritual progress. Very serious aparad, especially aparad to very great souls, sadhu ninda, can actually practically destroy one's spiritual advancement. Of course, in one sense, spiritual advancement is not destroyed, but it can get so covered over that the devotee may fall down from externally from devotional service and even totally forget that he is a devotee of the Lord for some time until it becomes revived. That is also possible. And that is why devotees are more worried about aparad than material sin. Of course, both should not be performed. Material sin also should not be performed and aparad should also not be performed. But aparad is more dangerous because aparad checks one's spiritual advancement. Material sin will produce some reactions but may not directly affect one's devotion. But aparad will check one's devotion, and when aparad comes and it checks one's devotion, then one will also become attracted to material sin. That can be an additional side effect. So aparads are of many types. There is a big topic. There is seva aparad, there is dham aparad, there is Vaishnava aparad, there is guru aparad, there is aparad in deity worship. There can be aparad towards the prasad of the Lord, the aparad towards the holy name, nam aparad. There are many types of aparads. But the most dangerous type of aparad, which is most difficult to overcome, is the aparad to great devotees. And typically, how is that aparad manifested? When we simply criticize or we indulge in hearing about criticism of other great souls, especially advanced. So that is why it is said, even Priyavrata Maharaj, right? He appeared materialistically attached, but it is not attached. But if somebody would have come, oh, just see, Priyavrata was gone to the forest, but now see, such an attached fellow. See, he's walking around in the park with his wife. Such a materialistic attached. Somebody says like that, he has committed Vaishnava aparad. You understand? I'm just giving an example.
Yes.
Correct? So one should be very careful not to judge and criticize great souls. Sometimes there may not be any mistake. Sometimes there may be a mistake. But it is not our business to point out and scrutinize and evaluate and comment on the mistakes of great souls. That also becomes aparad. Once Brahmaji made a small mistake, I'll not go into that story, but it's a mistake and some devatas laughed looking at it. Brahmaji will just see what he's doing. Immediately they became implicated in aparad. Even though they were technically right, and the mistake was actually there. So these are very subtle things in the science of devotion. So what this means is the best consciousness for a great soul is not to be in the consciousness of judging others. So let us be concerned about us and our spiritual advancement, and not being quality analyst for other people's spiritual life, especially of those of great souls. Okay? Have I answered?
Yes, Prabhuji. But some of the aparad we do unknowingly, right? We didn't know that that was an aparad. So, so the effect is less, isn't it?
Yes. If we do unknowingly, the effect is less. And if we chant the holy name nicely, sincerely, then the smaller offenses will go away in due course. Okay. Especially the accidental ones. But if there are serious aparadhs, especially against a devotee, the Lord will somehow or the other give us the intelligence to understand, and we must go to that devotee and beg forgiveness. Then one will become free from the offense. Otherwise, one doesn't become free.
Hare Krishna.
Hari Bol. Hari Bol, Rishi. Okay. If there's nothing else, we will conclude the class for today. Thank you very much. Please continue to read along and study along. Yeah. Thank you. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Samaveta Gaur Bhakta. Satiji, Hare Krishna, Shalini ji, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Anita
Hare
Mataji,
Krishna.
thank you. Sridhar ji, thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much.
Prabhu, thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Thank you,
Krishna.
Prabhu.
Indulekha
Hari Om Tat
Mataji,
Sat.
thank you. Hari Bol.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you.
Yes, Praveen and family, Hari Bol. Sachi Prema Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yes, Ashwin, Hari Bol. I can see a mustache above your lips.
Yes, Prabhu.
Very good, very good. Yes. Okay, thank you all. I'll see you all